Hi everyone, how are you doing? I'm really excited because we're painting a very cute subject matter today. We are doing two otters bobbing along together holding hands. It's something that my patrons have requested, and I thought this would be a really perfect time to let you know that on September 1st I am increasing my Patreon prices just a little bit, but that means there is the opportunity for you to join us in August and get in before the prices go up. So if you're wondering what Patreon is all about, I thought I would show you some of the paintings that we've been doing over there just before we get going with our cute little otter tutorial. So here we have some examples of the paintings you could paint with me right now on Patreon. So here we have a lovely sunny scene from an old town where we've been looking at glazes, how to really bring out the sunshine and the contrast and then sort of dull things down with shadows, and how you have more detail in the foreground versus how to create things off in the distance. And that is a sweet pea tier and above session, and the idea is we go really nice and slow. Patreon is for all abilities, and I really can't stress that enough. I break these tutorials into sort of 3 or 4 sessions so you can paint at your own pace, and they're always there if you want to access them later on. Here we have a lovely little still life study which was done in one of my live stream sessions. So not only do we have film tutorials on Patreon just like this one right now, we also do live streams which are interactive, where I teach and show you brand new techniques, and we just go over things. So this is a lovely little still life. Then we had a really nice, slightly more experimental session recently where we were looking at trying to capture that movement, that sudden movement of birds on the branch, and how you can sort of be a bit more expressive with your painting. This was another watercolour challenge from the sweet pea and above tier. And then we do also do the classic botanicals, but this one was fantastic because I have a lot of patrons in Australia and New Zealand, and they told me all about the plants and flowers that grow and are familiar to them. And that's the wonderful thing about Patreon, is you get to have so much interaction with me in terms of asking for tutorials on specific things that we may not be able to cover on YouTube. So that was a lovely painting project. And then also we do still life and landscapes and lovely little window scenes. This was another live stream class where everyone painted along live with me. So don't forget that on September 1st, my Patreon prices are increasing just a little bit, and I wanted you to have the chance to join before those prices go up. So join before September 1st and you'll be on the lower current price for Patreon. And of course you can edit or cancel your membership at any point, but like I said, I just wanted to let you know now before anything changes, and so you can get the absolute best deal possible right now. Okay, let's get on with some painting. Grab your paints and let's get started. So to paint our lovely otters, we're going to use a piece of paper that is about 6 by 7 inches square, and I'm going to draw some very simple shapes to get the body. So we're going to begin with a sort of, I don't know, a sort of eggplant, aubergine, kind of rounded shape like that. And then at the top, I'm just going to sort of create a bit more of a head shape. And then we're going to have a few little sort of extra lumps for the arms. And then the feet are quite something. We'll sort of get a little bit of a leg going on, and then a funny little foot, and then we'll have a foot coming up off there, and just an extra little shape like that. And on the head itself, they've got these wonderful little noses, these sort of triangular, well, they're sort of triangular with a bit of a lump on the bottom, and then a nice little sort of jowl coming down and just a little mouth like that, and then some very cute little ears, maybe even a bit smaller than that. I think they, yeah, maybe a little bit smaller. And then some lovely little eyes like that. And then of course the tail. Which is rather lovely. So I'm going to draw a second one because I love it when you see two together. So I've just repeated exactly the same shape, but the one thing that we all love to see is when they hold hands, and it's very cute. Now, what can be a bit strange is the way these sort of limbs act. I think the best thing to do is try and keep it really simple. So I'm going to just, I've got a paw like coming up here, and then I'm just going to do one sort of as if it's coming up from behind. So you see I did that paw, one coming off the body there, and then this little sort of wrap around is just, well, most of it is unseen there. So if you are not keen on drawing and you want to just take a screen grab of this, then by all means do that. We'll just pause the video, take a screen grab, and you can trace from that, or otherwise we are ready to just roller our drawing with a kneadable eraser to just remove most of the pencil so we can get ready for painting. So we've gone through all the drawing and we've got that now nicely sort of knocked back, and we're going to start thinking about colours. So I think the face is a lot paler than the rest of the body, so I think buff titanium will be great. Then we've got burnt sienna, which will be a good sort of rich brown, and then you do have the sort of, you know, the variety of browns that you want to feature, and also there's a sort of slightly grey feel, a cooler brown, so I'm getting some Payne's grey in there as well. But what we do is we always start with our lighter colours first. So I'm going to, I probably need to go down a size actually. Let's go down to a size 6. Just check my brushes are clean. Okay. So I'm going to paint these quite nice and sort of quite loosely to begin with buff titanium faces. But you can see I'm painting them quite quickly and quite sort of, yeah, quite wet. Just coming down into the chest there. Because this is the lightest colour, it doesn't really matter if we go over bits that we're going to be painting different colours later. Just all the way down the tummy there. And then I'm going to take a size 2 brush. And I'm going to try some of this burnt sienna, sort of just mixed in with the Payne's grey, and just start to get a little bit of a wet on wet appearance of the side of the body into the tummy. And it's really nice because we immediately get a nice sense of the body shape. Just sort of gently blending in to that buff titanium tummy. And now I can take some slightly richer browns, just my regular burnt sienna, and just start to sort of introduce that, just remembering where the animal in the foreground was. Blending up. It's a warm day today, so colours are going to sort of dry quite fast, so hence why I'm working nice and fast. Just get the colour right down there into the tails with a nice sort of watery tea-like consistency of the paint. And you can see I'm not too worried about things being a bit sort of brush strokey, because we're slowly going to build up texture, so I quite like it. Once you've let it dry, you can then glaze over the top, just like I've done here, to get a feel of the limbs just sort of coming up, and then also sort of around the edge. If you've got things that you want to just bleed and blend in, you can do that as well. And then with the paws, again, just keeping it very simple. Just trying to use sort of the absolute minimum amount on my brush, and then also just get their little holding hands. Now the one thing when I was researching otters was I couldn't get over their feet. Their feet are very strange, like they've got big old sort of flipper-like feet, but they sort of flip in all senses of the word. They flip over as well. So if I sort of paint in these shapes, we'll be doing toes that sort of fold over and flip over it a bit. So yeah, something to look forward to. So you can see I'm just painting them up to the tops, but I'm not worrying too much about there. And then the thing we can start to do is start to think about a little bit of texture, because these shapes have started to dry. So I'm going to start by, on the head, just with this nice pale amount, is just getting a little bit of colour just down the bridge of the nose, over the forehead, around the eyes. And then we can start to use these brown glazes, and I might just get a smaller brush, a size 0, to start to give these little fellas a little bit of sort of nice hair and texture. So nice little fine lines. But what's great is about these textures is the hair, because it is wet, can be quite slick. So these quite sort of big brush stroke lines. And then as my brush sort of starts to run out of colour a little bit, it can come into the middle and be just that little bit paler. But you could take some more buff titanium and just paint in these nice fine lines. The most important thing is that you are sort of following the contours of the body, so that the hairs sort of very much sort of go down through the tummy. But yeah, give it a lovely sort of quite simple bit of texture. The joy of having two means I can paint one and then demonstrate the second whilst you can see what it looks like. So just using my size 0 brush and glazes of browns mixed in with Payne's grey. And so up around the legs, I'm sort of just making it a bit more of a sort of rounded shape like that. So the brush strokes just wrap around. And then when it's more about just the fur coming down the body. And then when you're sort of blending up into areas you want to have a little bit paler, I'm just using sort of a increasingly clean brush. But all this is just about building texture on your shape, and It's what suddenly transforms it from a sort of fairly simple, flat kind of shape into something a little bit more lifelike, but also just a bit fun and whimsical. So for the sort of round the sides of the body here, so I'll just sort of carefully go in and sort of wrap some of these hairs around. But we just want that sort of slight edging. And then on the paw, so you've got these long sort of finger-like sort of furry paws. And then you could always get a little bit extra Payne's grey, a bit more burnt sienna, just make it a little darker and stronger. And just get a little bit of that in there. And then up around the face, we want to get some brush strokes in there to sort of help define the shapes again. So just make sure your brush has quite a lot of sort of dilute colour on it, and if it feels like there's too much, then just sort of dab it off on a piece of scrap paper before you pop it on your piece. So now I've done the little bits of hair over on that one, so I've just with my size 0 brush, just exactly the same kind of technique, just making sure your brush strokes are following the line of it all, and then coming sort of round the side. See, that feels possibly a little bit too strong, so that feels like a good chance to just get water on the brush instead. There we go. Okay, I think it's time to have a look at these funny toes then. So I'm just getting some more brown, it's all browns, and we're going to create a sort of floppy paw over the top. Remember, these are not sort of botanical, anatomical, accurate drawings, but what they are is just, we'll have his toes flipping over like that. It's funny, I keep on looking at the reference picture and going, I don't believe it, but it is, this is what they look like. So just going to, one thing I might not be exact on is like the number of toes, but as I said, this is a sweet little illustration. So I'm just bringing the feet down like that and just getting a little bit of darkness like that. So we'll just finish off the paws and then we can do details and the water. Now we've let this dry and I've left the faces, the detail on the faces, unpainted, because what I want to do now is do a glaze of water that the otters are floating in. So I've got aqua green, I've got some Prussian blue, and I've got some Winsor blue. And what I want to do is use these colours to glaze over the top of this and create the sense of the otters being in the water. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it so that their legs and their torsos are out of the water. Now it's very important that you are doing this with your painting completely dry. And also maybe just have a little think about which bits are the bits that are going to be up out of the water. And a glaze means that we're painting with dilute colour that will allow the colours underneath. I think I'll go right up there, there we go. So I'm just carefully going around these feet. And then of course the heads are up out of the water, so we will make sure that the rest of our watery surroundings are just around the edges of these two. And we're going to let that dry. But you can see how I've left a little bits of unpainted space here and there to start creating the sense of the sort of the water rippling around. But I am just going to sort of add just a little bit more sort of colour to it whilst it is still wet. And we're going to let that dry 100%. Now I made sure that I left this for quite a long time, maybe a good 10 minutes. It needs to be, again, 100% dry, because we're now going to paint in just a few more little glazes of little ripples around the various sort of areas sticking up out of the water. And I'm just using the blues that I was using here. But what I'd also like to do is add a bit of highlight, add a bit of water as well after I've placed in my low lights. I'm also going to take some Payne's Grey and just get one or two little dark bits as well. Okay, so I'm going to use some Liquitex acrylic ink as my white highlight. I'm going to pour that out into my palette, but I'm just going to wait to use it until this is dry. So the last thing I can do whilst I'm waiting is get my facial details painted in. So I'm just going to be a little bit careful. And so I've got some ivory black here, and one thing I can do to begin with is just a few little dots for the eyes, just with my size 0 brush, and I'm just sort of making a little sort of kind of little lump shape with slightly flattened bottom. And then I'll get some slightly more dilute colour. Doesn't feel very dilute, does it? There we go. I want to get that a bit sort of light first so that then I can go in with my slightly stronger, darker colour and just draw that down. And do the tiny little sort of chinny mouth like that. And then we've got some little ears, so I'll just get a tiny bit of brown in with those dark tones. And the ear will just sort of come up the end there. We might see it a little bit there. And actually the water around this one needs just a little bit extra. And then I can place in these slightly darker tones sort of on the paws as well. And just start to get that detail in. I'm now going to use a tiny bit of the shadowy colour with my size 0 brush to do some whiskers. And they might take a little bit of, there we go, a little bit of just getting used to how much colour you need on the brush. But just using this shadowy colour will do the job. And then I think they have like maybe a little chin. I think that makes all the difference. Just blend that in a little bit. And yeah, I think that's the otters done really nicely, but I just want to sort of place in just a little highlight on the water. So like I said, I'm using this Liquitex white ink, and it's acrylic ink, and it's just a lovely sort of finishing touch, especially sort of in contrast to the low lights that you've got there. And I don't sort of overthink it too much. I just like to put in a little bit, especially sort of around the areas where they are sort of really interacting with the water. But there we have a lovely set of otters just bobbing along together in the water. Thank you so much for watching. So just to remind you all that my Patreon will be increasing its prices just a little bit on the 1st of September, and I'd love to make sure that you can get in before those prices go up and fix your price in August. So head to the episode notes below to join, find out more about the different membership tiers. There's something for everybody in there and something for everyone of all painting abilities. But thank you so much. I really hope you enjoyed this one. I had so much fun painting it, and there are plenty more sweet little animal tutorials on YouTube in the illustration channel, and then plenty more, far more sort of in-depth detailed studies on Patreon. So thank you again, and don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. It makes all the difference to supporting the channel, and I will see you again very soon. Bye!